These are some NBA role players who wanted to be stars, and we gotta start with Dion Waiters. Now, Dion was a clear example of a guy whose self-perception didn't meet reality. He came into the Cavs organization with the reputation of being one of the best scorers in the nation, with a bit more than a touch of confidence to go along with it, and he immediately claimed, "I'm coming." If you look around, Kobe Bryant and Dwayne Wade and those guys, they paved the way for a player like me, and they're almost done. But that confidence didn't transfer to the courts, not in the long run at least. Dion was basically just Kyrie's co-star during those terrible Cavalier days before LeBron, and during this time, Dion would show off potential, being able to shoot the ball and being capable of being a spark plug sixth-man type of talent, but while he was doing it, he was also bitching and moaning about how he deserved the credit more than Kyrie, which is obviously utter delusion. Once LeBron came home, everything changed in Cleveland. He was supposed to be the third option alongside Kyrie, but in 33 games with LeBron on his team, his scoring dropped from 16 points per game to 10.5, while shooting 25% from the three-point line. I mean, this guy was a total baby about getting his way. He was calling out his teammates for playing buddy ball and cutting him out of the offense, just to go ahead and still be a high-usage, inefficient ball stopper on offense. Once LeBron came, the one skill that Dion proved to have in his arsenal to some extent in shooting the ball was set to be put to use. But he refused to be a spot-up guy and built brick mansions on some of the shittiest shooting splits I've ever seen, which forced Cleveland's hand to give up this guy immediately. He made a living on being an isolation scorer and shot chucker, and it was hard for him to be a complimentary role player to a championship-level team. But he wouldn't last long in Cleveland when he got moved to OKC, which didn't help out much either. He had to play alongside Russ and KD, and although he was still putting up a shit ton of shots, he still wasn't efficient, and so he didn't last long there either. It kind of appeared that Dion had his shot in Cleveland, but he was too delusional to accept his role, and not good enough to become a star. But shockingly, after his OKC run, Dion Waiters' real chance was yet to come. After losing another 6'3" shooting guard in Dwayne Wade, the Miami Heat had a major opening, and Dion Waiters found himself in the perfect spot to revive his career. He signed a modest one-year, $3 million deal, a low-risk gamble for a franchise that values discipline and culture above all else. For Waiters, it was likely his last real shot to prove he belonged in the NBA, before becoming an end-of-the-bench journeyman. To his credit, he delivered. As the season went on, Dion steadily improved, averaging 16 points per game, while posting career highs in assists and three-point percentage. He became a vital piece for a team trying to stay relevant after the Wade era. Unfortunately, an ankle injury ended his season prematurely, robbing him of the chance to lead Miami into the playoffs. But the Heat had seen enough to believe in him and put their money where their mouth was, rewarding Waiters with a hefty 4-year, $52 million contract, an aggressive show of faith that no team had ever extended to him before. That faith would not be repaid. After recovering from his ankle issues, Waiters returned to the team out of shape, prompting even head coach Erik Spoelstra to publicly call him out, saying he needed to get back into Miami Heat shape. From there, things unraveled quickly. Dion began clashing with coaches and teammates, but the real disaster came when he took THC gummies on a team flight, unaware that the altitude would magnify their effects. The result was a full-blown panic attack at 30,000 feet, leading to a 10-game suspension. Only a month later, he called in sick to miss a team event, then posted pictures on Instagram celebrating his birthday on a yacht. It was the final straw for Miami. After a string of injuries and self-inflicted mistakes, they decided to move on, shipping him to Memphis, where he was promptly waived. Waiters got one last chance in the NBA, signing with the 2020 Lakers for their title run, but played in just 5 garbage time playoff games before his phone stopped ringing. The harsh reality set in. His talent was no longer enough to outweigh the baggage. Waiters spiraled into a deep depression after his NBA exit, later admitting, "I was just not having fun. I had thoughts of not being around, but I've got kids. I'd rather be miserable the rest of my life than leave them without a father." He described days spent lying in bed, unmotivated to work or even leave the house, as everyone around him still leaned on him financially. Dion Waiters was really the prime example of a role player thinking they were a star in every walk of life. This dude was isolating guys with 1,000% confidence while shooting 32% from the field. This dude played his way out of the NBA through taking bad shots with a terrible attitude, just to get another chance, actually capitalize on it, get paid in a major way, then act untouchable and ruin his career in the dumbest way possible. But at least he's taking some accountability, so shout out Dion. If you're watching this right now, there's an 81% chance that you're not subscribed to the channel, so make sure to hit that button for me. We're trying to hit 100K by the end of the month, and I appreciate you boys watching. Now, if Dion was the perfect poster child, J.R. Smith somehow even edges him out. He was still the main character whether he wanted to or not, and he built a highlight reel that probably rivals a lot of superstars playing today. But there was a low light for each of those highlights. J.R. Smith came into the league as a young but hungry guard in New Orleans. He had people excited to watch him play, but he was a little bit too confident for his own good. Unlike some of these guys, his role was very carved out. He was a role player through and through. He was never an all-star, nor would he really ever be in those conversations. He spent the prime years of his career as the sixth man for the Nuggets and the New York Knicks. He even won a Sixth Man of the Year award and came in second in a different season, and to be honest, during those years, he was quite special. JR was a different kind of role player, where most guys might give you 12 to 18 a night, let's say, to average their 15 points. JR either gave you 37 or 4 to average the same 15. He had over-the-top athleticism with some of the wildest in-game dunks of all time. He had no bag, really, he couldn't really handle the ball, but to suffice for that, he just got very good at making contested shots, which was kind of hilarious to watch. He didn't really provide any consistency, he didn't provide defense. What he provided was a unique scoring punch that on some nights was as valuable as top players in the league, while being close to unplayable the rest of the time. It was truly hilarious. He played alongside a young Carmelo Anthony in Denver, and then played with him in New York, and the two together just seemed comedic looking back at it. Melo was the star of the team, but JR, with his incredibly over-the-top celebrations, goofy off-the-court antics, and unique personality, just added more to the chaos that team was. And then he went to Cleveland. Calling contested shots better than open shots because open shots were boring was pretty crazy. But when you get into the meme universe that formed around him, from the Hennessy to dribbling the clock out in the NBA Finals, you just couldn't take this guy seriously anymore. I mean, looking at the numbers statistically, J.R. Smith is literally one of the greatest shooters of all time. He's currently top 25 all-time in three-pointers made, while shooting a very decent 37% from behind the arc. I mean, JR had the talent level of a superstar. The shot making was crazy, the confidence was there, and due to this, he was able to be a very functional role player that was well above average in the NBA for most of his career. But if this guy had a league average basketball IQ, a decent handle on the ball, and was willing and a half-decent passer, this guy would have reached all-star level minimum, no doubt about it. J.R. Smith always seemed like the main character. His heat-checking style, while it was a liability, could sometimes pay dividends. But in reality, he was, at his best, a complimentary piece, and one of the most exciting sixth men we've seen in a long time. He just couldn't get to that superstar level, even though he definitely acted the part. But the guy to be taken literally right before him in the 04 draft had a similar mentality in Josh Smith. Like JR, Josh Smith was one of the most tantalizing talents in the league, but just as frustrating. The athletic forward seemed to be able to dunk on anyone, lock anyone down, and ignite crowds in the meantime. He was a very, very talented player that was a magnet for highlight reels and appeared to have superstar upside. But he also became known for his poor shot selection, especially from three-point land, where he shot the tray ball at a career 28% while taking around 2 per game. When you draft a guy like Jay Smooth, fresh out of high school, there are going to be some knots to untie. And at the end of the day, because he was the freak of nature that he was, Atlanta could live with it. They had been lost since the days of Dikembe Mutombo and Mookie Blaylock, and needed some big-time answers. And as time went by under Mike Woodson, they found a groove once again. Guys like ISO Joe and Al Horford came along as well, and the Hawks were at least a playoff team once again. At his peak, Smith was averaging 16, 9, and 4, and was consistently in the Defensive Player of the Year convos. He was electrifying, and in a league that was beginning to reward players who could guard multiple positions, he thrived in his role. He brought an aura of versatility that was unique and undervalued at the time, especially on the defensive end. I mean, his value on the defensive end was huge, and even yet, was underutilized compared to how much havoc he would have caused today. He became the youngest player in NBA history to reach both 500 and 1,000 blocks, and after 9 years in Atlanta, he scored a big contract in Detroit where he got the ultimate green light, only for it to result in some of the ugliest percentages in the league. In his first season, he shot 26% from deep while shooting 3.5 per game. He was a disaster for Detroit. In his first month with the team, he took about 8 shots per game from further than 15 feet while only making 2 of them. And one thing became extremely clear. Josh Smith could not survive as the #1 scoring option. When there were scorers like Jamal Crawford and Joe Johnson around him who could create infinitely better, he could eat up opposing offenses with his defensive ability and turn arounds and get easy looks in transition. But when asked to create for himself, this guy just looked way too raw of a talent to have that sort of responsibility. If he could have stuck to what he did best, he probably would have been a lot more valuable and a lot more successful. In his best season, he shot 7 total threes, made an all-defensive team, and at 24, could have had a lot more coming to him. He had the tools to be a perennial all-defensive, all-star player, but he just couldn't stop chucking these fucking 3-balls, dude. He'd end up getting waived by Detroit a year and a half into his contract, and signed a few one-year deals here and there, before finding himself playing in the Big 3 League at 33 years old, where, ironically, he got ejected in his first game in front of furious Detroit fans. Smith's career was interesting, because he had tools that made him more than a role player, but he made decisions that knocked him lower than what he was and what he could have been. He was a beast at a few things, all having to do mostly with his natural gifts, while having an above-average handle to him for a power forward. Really just being that rim runner who can take guys off the bounce a bit, and maybe developing a little mid-range pull-up game and blossoming as a playmaker would have made him more than solid enough at his position for the time. But through a bad role on a bad team and a lack of self-awareness, it always seemed that Josh Smith was trying to play a brand of basketball that just wasn't true to himself. Nick Young was another cult hero that rode his fame to unusually high levels. He was another guard who came into the league in the 2000s, established himself as a natural and efficient scorer his first few years in the league, but his reputation quickly morphed as his career progressed. The 6'7" guard had a smooth jumper and a streaky shooting touch, but once he became known as Swaggy P, there was no turning back. That label gave him a new confidence that made him look like more than just a shooter off the bench. He was a star, just not on the court. Through his best years, Swaggy P was just a three-point shooter off the bench that took shots in volume. But over time, he actually stayed decently efficient, around 44% from the field, and pushed close to 40% from deep, while scoring in the high teens at his peak on some very bad teams. I mean, Swaggy P wasn't really the worst chucker in the world. He was pretty bought into his team's systems and understood that he wasn't the man, whether he was playing with Arenas, Kobe, or Stephen Clay, and over time grew into being a legitimate 3-and-D guy. But the whole Swaggy P thing really just blew up this guy's name into something so much bigger than you'd expect for a dude in his position. The amount of coverage this guy got would make a casual think that he was more integral to those Lakers teams than he actually was, but in reality, he was a bench piece for one of the most historic franchises and one of the worst ruts in history. He had 1 year as a starter, but it was one of the worst years in franchise history. But still, you gotta hand it to him, he rode the wave of Lakers fame perfectly. From celebrating a missed shot, to getting memed into oblivion with his confused face, Swaggy P became one of the most recognizable people in the entire NBA. But unlike some of these guys, he wasn't all that bad at playing his role. He shot 37.6% from 3 in his career, and played a minor but still pretty important role as he got carried to the 2018 title with the Warriors before going around and acting like it was him who carried them to a title. Dion had Waiters Island, Smith had the shirtless parades and the Henny memes, but if you think about it, Nick Young's entire career and legacy was built purely just off of memes. There was no hesitation to his game, and for being a 6'7" guard, he definitely didn't take advantage of it. I mean, you don't really think of Nick Young and say, oh yeah, that guy was a beast. You think of Nick Young and remember the jokes. He surrounded himself with superstars but became relevant, not because he played up to their level, but because he brought a level of unseriousness that stuck out like a sore thumb. But at the end of the day, a lot of people loved Swaggy P for that, and it's why people still remember who he was today. Now, Cam Thomas is a much more recent example of this phenomenon, and depending on who you ask, he might not be deserving of a spot here at all, but to be fair, the only career he has known has been with the Brooklyn Nets. But still, he's taken the bucket getter reputation a bit too far. He gained the reputation back in his LSU days under Will Wade, when he averaged 23 points per game on 17 shots as a freshman. So honestly, we should have all seen this coming. It isn't just that Cam Thomas shoots at a high volume, but it feels like he's actively trying to hoist as many shots as he can. While that can translate to high point totals, occasional explosions, and a clutch shot or two, it will also lead to some low percentages and the mantra of being a ball hog, which is the side that Thomas certainly has leaned into a bit towards his NBA tenure. During his rookie campaign, he shot 27% from 3, and something clearly changed when he shot over 10% better the following season. But in those first couple years, there were guys in his way like Kyrie, KD, or Harden, so when those guys left town, it left a gaping offensive hole that needed to be filled, and Cam Thomas, then a third-year player, had gained the confidence to step into that void. But even he didn't quite know what he was going to be doing. But what he did know is that he was going to get buckets. He scored 22.5 per game, and then 24 per game in the following season, but it wasn't the same as a guy like Steph or any other star-level player doing it. Last season, Thomas only played 23 games, and he was able to average 24, because the Nets have been in a situation where it's like, shit, someone's kind of got to score here. I mean, imagine what MPJ is going to be doing in Brooklyn next season. Thomas can't really play great defense, he isn't necessarily a good playmaker, even a lot of his offensive numbers aren't really that great, but he gets the ball in the basket. And so, when he asked for $40 million a year, the consensus was a resounding fuck no, dude. That would put him up with guys like Tyler Hero, who managed to put the ball in the basket on a similar volume, on more winning franchises, on higher efficiency, without hurting his teammates in the process. And he's simply just not on that level. Maybe in the future he can mold into a guy like that, but he lacks the well-roundedness that would put him on another level. And too many teams have been screwed over by deals like that, he's just not going to come anywhere near it. He believes that he can stand with the All-Stars, which is great from a confidence standpoint, but in reality, that's not what's going on here. He's been a bit of an empty calories ball hog, not a star worth $40 million for a few years now, but I guess he's still young, he can still change that, but until he works on his game, nothing's going to change. If there's been a trend that should be pointed out with all these guys, it's that a lot of them are sixth men, and Jordan Clarkson keeps that trend going. Clarkson was a second rounder for the Lakers in 2014, and quickly got to work. He was one of the more natural scorers in the draft class, and it showed when he worked his way into a 25 minutes per game role with 12 points per game, all as a late second rounder. But after all, with Kobe's decline, a lot more of the young guys on that team were trying to be up next, with Clarkson leading the way with his aggressive style of play. Clarkson had the ability to play the points, but his natural talent was still his scoring, and he quickly made a name for himself out of that. In his second season, he was the second leading scorer in LA, only behind a retiring Kobe Bryant, and once Kobe was gone, he kept it up, even if it meant taking a role as a sixth man. He thrived on isolation possessions, one-on-ones, and tough contested shots. He carried himself like the most confident guy on the floor, especially when he was just chucking up contested three balls. As his career developed, it was clear that Clarkson was going to be a career sixth man. Sure, he probably could have been a starter somewhere, but his ability to be a microwave scorer made him a valuable bench asset, even on teams where he was probably better than some of the starters. He stood out off the court as well, too. From his out-there fashion choices that he should have been jailed for, to that stint where he dated a Jenner, he's certainly found some ways to make headlines. Then when you see the tattoos or the way he carries himself on social media put together, he makes it look like he's a superstar. He would win the Sixth Man of the Year award from the 2021 season, but other than that, he doesn't really have a ton of accolades to show off from when he's been on the court. I mean, in the past couple of years, he's been wasting away with the Jazz, but surprisingly, with every chance to shop him around, the one Sixth Man of the Year is not really worth jack shit on the open market. What's became clear in recent years is these raw, isolation-heavy microwaves are close to dead in the NBA. We've accepted that the Jahlil Okafor style back-to-the-basket big man is long gone. We have no more Roy Hibberts walking around, and even the Hassan Whiteside big dude is kinda gone. But something that seems to be out the door in the meantime is the classic no defense, no passing, get a bucket style sixth man. It's not exactly surprising in the era of analytics that someone who kinda only provides scoring will die when not doing so efficiently, but Jordan Clarkson's career is an interesting little timestamp in the progression of where the game is heading. Lance Stephenson was another second-round steal when he came into the league fresh off a stellar freshman season at Cincinnati, for the most part. Teams liked his NBA-ready body, and his combination of power and quickness had him bodying opponents. But then there were some drawbacks. An assault charge in high school had people questioning his character, and his body language on the court was, quote, awful. He argued with refs, coaches, teammates, opponents, it didn't matter. And as far as his game went, he loved to take difficult shots. Fadeaways and stubborn three balls marred his college career, and he finished as a 22% three-point shooter. But, as his nickname stated, he was born ready. He came into an organization that featured PG and Danny Granger, and he acted like he had been there before. It took a year or two for him to get some sufficient playing time, but when he did, he was contributing to an Eastern Conference Finals caliber team. At his peak in Indiana, he was averaging 14 points per game, and in that season, there was a certain buzz around Lance. When he stepped on the court, both coaches got scared with what he might do. He could hit 5 threes or go 2 for 10. He played with a natural swagger that you only see out of guys every now and then. And when he blew in LeBron's ear in the 2014 Eastern Conference Finals, if you didn't know about his antics already, you found out about him then. He never saw a shot that he didn't like. And although he was getting plenty in Atlanta, he still left town and went to Charlotte. He hopped around on different teams looking for the same production that he had at his best with the Pacers, but he never found it again. He would finally get himself back to Indiana, where he played in a bench role for a season, before again reviving his popularity with the Lakers. Around career-long entertainers like JaVale McGee, Lonzo Ball, and of course Bron, Lance's career was pretty much over. He went over to China after that before getting back to Indiana for the third and final time, before he retired as one of the most interesting players in NBA history. And he couldn't have summarized his personality better than when he said, "I like money, but I want status." Putting Lance Stephenson on the floor was a gamble every single time. Even though his nickname said that he was born ready, he was only actually ready every once in a while. He has one of the most unserious legacies in NBA history, and even though he spent his whole career with his head up like he was a star, just because you hit a couple of tough shots and blew in LeBron's ear doesn't even get you close to that. In recent news, Lance Stephenson squared up with Michael Beasley in a one-on-one, and Beasley is the next guy on this list. Like Stephenson, Beasley had one of the best builds in a player, and he too was a natural scorer. People talk about Beasley and say that he could beat anyone in a straight-up one-on-one, and with stories of him mopping the floor with LeBron, that's probably true. I mean, how often do you see someone drop 26 and 12 in college? Pretty much never. And when we do, they're pretty much bona fide buckets. But Michael Beasley, sure as shit, did not do that. And I don't blame scouts for putting him up with Kevin Durant or Carmelo Anthony just because he was that damn talented. As a rookie, he played like a veteran, averaged 14 points per game on pretty good efficiency, but it was already becoming apparent that it would be hard for teams to take Beasley's ability and apply it well, but he didn't make it easy for them either. He was an off-the-court disaster, as well as being a tweener on the floor. Before he even got to the league, he had to fess up to smoking during a rookie program, and he got into many other weed-related incidents. He straight up hijacked his career, both on and off the floor. He created unique ways to score the ball, and there were glimpses of him performing well, but instead of settling into a role where he could develop, he did the opposite. Coaches wanted him to focus on an all-around game, but all he wanted to do was shoot and shoot a lot. He was a terrible defender. He didn't pass the rock. Basically, he lacked discipline everywhere other than playing like he's at LA Fitness. His only season where he came close to averaging 20 came with a 17-65 Timberwolves squad that was full of cans apart from Kevin Love. He would spend some time with 6 other teams in the last 7 years of his career because no team could stand him for that lengthy of a time. It's tough to say that he was trying his hardest off the floor to become a star because he did the exact opposite basically. There weren't a lot of highs in his career, well, on the court at least, but there definitely should have been some. Everyone knew how dangerous he could have been. He had gotten himself together off of the court, but he had to sit back and play a role that he never stuck around long enough to get. The thing about Beasley was that he was really supposed to be great, but it was all an illusion. You'd watch him for 5 minutes and think he's unstoppable, and then look on ESPN, and then see for the 14th time he got caught smoking weed. Even now he thinks he could still take anyone one-on-one, but just because you beat Lance Stephenson in 2025 doesn't mean you can pretend that your NBA career was what it should have been. Now, Sizzle was one of those NBA players that can be hard to put in a certain category. He had his moments, but there was a reason why he only lasted 6 years in the league. Before even getting to the NBA, Jordan Crawford dunked on LeBron, and as a sophomore at Xavier, had averaged 20 points a game. He was destined for success, and no one believed that more than himself. He didn't get much time in Atlanta, but would get traded to the Wizards, apparently because he was a menace in the Atlanta clubs with Jeff Teague, before he had a breakout second half of the season. He was put up in special company with John Wall after he dropped a triple-double right after scoring a season-high 39 points. With Washington, he found a role and gained confidence, but it feels like he got a bit too much freedom. With Atlanta, he shot about 33% from 3, which isn't that great, but in Washington, while shooting over twice as many threes, he shot about 24%. To be fair, he was just a rookie, and there were a handful of impressive performances, but an adjustment was very much so needed. He wanted to be the best player out there, and he believed he was, going so far as to say that he could be better than MJ after just 1 full season in the league, with shooting numbers in the toilets, and even though it sounded fucking ridiculous, it got people talking about him once again. He placed an extremely high ceiling for himself after his rookie stint with the Wizards, but the truth is, that's the best he ever rose to. And a year and a half later, he would get moved to Boston after rookie Bradley Beal came to town. When Doc Rivers talked about Crawford, he called his confidence a good and a bad thing, and noted that Boston wouldn't be putting up with the extremities of it. Even though that team was getting older, they were still a well-run organization full of vets, and they weren't going to be willing to hand the baton over to fucking Jordan Crawford. In Boston, he randomly won Eastern Conference Player of the Week one week, but before that, fans wanted him out. And a couple of weeks after winning that award, they wanted him out again. He would eventually get traded to Golden State, where he somehow dropped 41 to end the season after averaging 7 points per game the rest of his time with the team. But that performance didn't really move the needle. Teams had already seen enough from Jordan Crawford to know that for every 30 bomb, there were about a dozen 2 for 10 shooting performances, and he was forced to go and play overseas in China. He would come back for a few more games, but not make much of a case for himself before going back to playing internationally. When his NBA career had ended, he'd only been around for 6 seasons, but with the turmoil of his career, it seemed like he was around for longer. The hype he brought in was fairly significant, but still delusional, and he eventually played himself out of the NBA. He played like an all-star, but never got close to actually being one. His role ended up being to chuck shots for half a season, have a couple of breakout games, and then get teams riled up enough to the point where they had to trade him. And his refusal to stop doing what he did had him out of the league very quickly. Now, Gerald Green is one of the go-to guys when you think of raw athleticism. Coming to the league straight out of high school, Green really made a name for himself at the 2007 Slam Dunk Contest, beating out Nate Robinson and Dwight Howard. Green flew and instantly became a star within NBA circles. After the dunk contest, Green started seeing the floor some more. People wanted to see him play, but after his second year in Boston, he struggled to find a solidified role. He was a run-and-gun type of player, but that wasn't enough to stay in the league. And after finding himself in Russia at just 24 years old, he needed to switch up. The Nets would be the next team to give him a chance, where he went in with the mindset to wow fans, and that he did. The most famous dunk of his career came in New Jersey when he caught a fast break lob while literally looking down at the rim before throwing it down. I mean, he even had the Rockets bench suppressing their excitement at what the fuck they just saw. He was one of a kind.
Nice outlet. On the run. 2-on-1. Green the finish. Wow, the alley-oop.
Oh my goodness. He just didn't make that a normal catch and finish. He caught it, brought it down, wound up, and threw it down.
Green's got him energized in Newark. Nets are within 2.
He never wanted to be the role player who sat in the corner and played serviceable defense, and that was the problem. But he wasn't exactly good enough to just run and dunk for a living, well, until he joined the Phoenix Suns. The 2013-2014 Suns, led by Jeff Hornacek at coach, and with Eric Bledsoe and Goran Dragic running the show, were grounded and having a fast-paced, exciting offense. And what better guy to do that than Gerald Green? In that season, Green had a career year. He shot the ball well, and he was allowed to play basketball the way that he loved. There was buzz around him to win the Most Improved Player of the Year award until his teammate Dragic beat him to it. But the point is, it looked like he was having fun out there, and he oozed confidence, not to mention he was cheesy as shit in 2K14, but for whatever reason, he could never recreate the magic of this season. He got moved to a bench role in the next year, and he didn't play nearly as well. It felt like the hype for him was still there from the year before, but his confidence didn't quite carry over, and the Suns were notably worse. From pretty much nostalgic purposes, it feels like he made more of a career for himself than he actually did, because for the few years of his career, he was a journeyman who couldn't capture his Phoenix Suns magic, and he resorted to being a subpar 3-and-D player. He shot way too many threes, turned the ball over way too much, and once his athleticism started leaving him, he had pretty much nothing else. He ended his career after 12 years with not a ton to show for it other than the dunk contest and one of the most impressive highlight tapes we've seen. But if not for that, he probably would have been just another guy. Now, who's better to round this off than Tony Wroten, one of the biggest shot-chucking bums the league has ever seen. I don't know whoever told him that he could shoot threes because it was probably one of the worst pieces of advice in the history of the sport. He was a first-round draft pick because he could get to the buckets and swing the rock pretty well, but he also shot the three ball at 16%. He was a high school sensation, so he already came up with a good amount of hype, and after a very uneventful rookie season in Memphis, he would get the chance to get some PT in Philly while they trusted the process, and he was just as much of a project as anyone else. He was a 6'6" point guard who played with a lot of intensity, with nicknames like Wrecking Ball and Junkyard Dog, but he played exactly like his nicknames. Somehow, even with how bad the Sixers were back then, he played below that level. In his 3 years with the team, he turned the ball over more than 3 times per game as the backup point guard and shot 23% from deep. He was given the greenest green light you could possibly get and abused the fuck out of it. He tried to get to the bucket on every possession, even though that wasn't what he was on the team to do, But then again, the Sixers were barely getting to double-digit wins back then, so I don't think they really gave a shit what he did. He had some injury issues, but even with that, no one should be playing that bad as a backup NBA point guard, where your job is to come in and make sure that everything doesn't fall apart. He did score a pretty decent amount, but it wasn't enough to get close to outweighing how bad his assist-to-turnover ratio was, or how trash his field goal percentages were. Honestly, it's surprising that he lasted as long as he did. When your competition is Ish Smith, and you get smoked by a mile, there really isn't much hope for you. Since that stint in Philly, Wroten has tried his hardest to get back to the league, but after years in the G League and after defrauding the NBA's healthcare program, he somehow buried himself even deeper than he was. Wroten carried the hallmark of irrational NBA players, but I guess if your goal in life is to make a few million in the NBA, burn out, and then defraud their healthcare plan, he achieved that goal. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and as always, I'll see you boys in the next one. Peace out.